Good afternoon again, councillors. We are currently discussing the council's revenue budget, and I have a point of clarification from Bailey Alistair Bailey.
Thank you for indulging me, Provost. During the recess, myself and others have observed the leader of the council to be moving around the building in a most collaborative manner, and we wondered whether that is reflective of the fact that he may have a revised amendment. Thank you. Motion, sorry.
Thank you. Leader of the council, would you like to respond to that?
Yes, I would like to read it out and put it up on the screen if that's possible, Provost.
I'm sure that would be helpful to members. Could committee services perhaps circulate Councillor Lang's revisions? If you would like to answer the point of clarification with your, and we'll put it up on screen as soon as we have it.
Okay, and thank you for the point of clarification, Bailey. Yes, I have. I think somebody's. Okay, so thanks. Yes, I have had what I hope was productive discussions during the recess. As I said this morning, I look forward to listening to today's debate and taking forward proposals from across the chamber that would benefit the people of Perth and Kinross. Having listened carefully today, I would be happy to make the following adjustments to the SNP revenue budget. From the independent group, I will reinstate recurring grant funding of £24,000 for Palochry Festival Theatre from 23-24. I will provide £40,000 of recurring funding to increase the capacity of the road safety team to enable our projects to proceed in a more timely fashion across the authority. We will invest £50,000 of non-recurring funding to undertake a feasibility study looking at Palochry Community Campus. That was after discussion with Provost McDade. In respect of our ALIOs, I will increase the Live Active Leisure SLA payment in 2023 by £110,000 on a non-recurring basis to maintain the Arthur Leisure Centre and community facilities until a review of leisure services is complete. I will also bring forward £80,000 of funding to allow Perth Theatre and Concert Hall to bring forward the Perth Office Box scheme. I will also want to increase the budget to roll out local area committees in Strathearn, Highland and Strathmore, and today commit £60,000 in both 24-25 and 25-26 to enable these area committees to be set up. We will also invest £80,000 to roll out breast buddies, £30,000 for no wrong door style training, and £120,000 to pilot the vitamin D3 supplementation. And finally, I will increase the successful Adapt Your Property, which was put forward by a few parties this morning. I will increase that successful Adapt Your Property budget by a further £100,000. From the Liberal Democrat group, I'm happy to include the following: £140,000 in both years 23-24 and 24-25 to provide intensive housing support. £80,000 to create a Think Yes fund to assist residents in the private housing sector. Another £100,000 to provide further support to parents and families in poverty. And also £100,000 on a non-recurring basis for modern apprentices. Additionally, I also commit to redirecting £300,000 from our increased financial insecurity budget towards specifically tackling parental employability, including key workers. From the Labour group, I am happy to commit £35,000 on a recurring basis to expand the community warden service, to embed an officer in Letham and Tulloch, and also £50,000 on a recurring basis to remove all charges for breakfast clubs. Finally, from the Conservative group, I am happy to support the proposal of £50,000 on a non-recurring basis towards translation, tools and equipment, and £5,000 on a recurring basis to further the good work of Bailey Ahern, Vice Provost, Deputy Provost Parrott and others with the Armed Forces Covenant. I also give the commitment that the additional proposals in the Labour amendment for CAB and the Conservative amendment for community kitchens in partnership with Giraffe will be found from the new anti-poverty budgets. I know that this additional expenditure will be funded by the recurring headroom remaining in our revenue budget, as well as additional contributions from the COVID-19 and transformation earmark reserves. While I know this, and I also recognise that this will impact on the Council in future years, and the effects of this will be included in the 24-25 budget. I'd like to thank you for the debate this morning and for the ideas that I value that were put forward by these other groups, and I'm happy to include them in my new amended motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Leader. Mr. Deputy Leader, as the seconder of the motion, are you content to agree those incorporation?
I indeed am. Thank you, Provost.
Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy Leader. I have a point of order from Peter Barrett. Councillor Peter Barrett.
Thanks, Provost. I'm grateful to the Leader of the Council for his statement and for his willingness to take on board proposals from other political groups. No one group has a complete monopoly on good ideas, although you'll forgive me for saying that I think the Liberal Democrats come pretty close. John Rebeck remarked to me that he thought I was remarkably restrained in proposing the Liberal Democrats amendment this morning, and he was right. But as I said at another council meeting recently, you can catch more bees with honey than vinegar, although it's maybe unfortunate that I don't have a sweet tooth. But in light of what the Leader of the Council has said, I would like to withdraw the Liberal Democrat amendment. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Barrett. Bailey McLaren, as the seconder of the amendment, are you content to agree to that?
Happy to agree. Thank you.
Thank you, Bailey McLaren. That is withdrawn. The Leader of the Council is indicating he wishes to come back in.
I have to apologise because in the hurry to get the papers completed, I will take the blame and not blame my the officer colleague because it was probably my fault. But I've omitted one item, which was for the play park in Comrie, whose name now escapes me, to be the Legion play park in Comrie to be refurbished in the second year, and I've had £50,000 commitment for that. And I would like that to be included in the motion.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Deputy Leader, are you content?
Indeed, thanks, Provost.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, members, we will now move on to the debate, and therefore I would invite any members wishing to contribute to indicate in the chat, and if no one wishes to contribute, it will be a very short discussion of the budget. Councillor Stuart Donaldson.
That helps. Provost McDade, fellow councillors. Last November, I have to say I was feeling somewhat gloomy and despondent. And those feelings intensified after seeing the first draft of budget proposals from council officers. This has been a tough and a difficult budget, with many hard choices having to be made. And yet, 4 months on, what we have arrived at is, I believe, a significant achievement. And with a proposed council tax of 3.9%, probably going to be the lowest in Scotland and one of the lowest in the UK, and considerably below the current rate of inflation. Headline rate is still over 10%. Provost, I think there's many to thank. Council officers, and as always, Scott Walker and Stuart Mackenzie and the finance officers, but also I think I would mention Claire Mailer and Carol Henry, because they've had a marked impact on the revenue paper and on the transformation, what's been proposed. I'd also like to thank the contributions made from several other parties and for their ideas. And we will continue to strive to be inclusive and collegiate. And in particular, I think I want to thank our council leader and deputy council leader, because I know over the last few months, few weeks in particular, they've worked their socks off and they've delivered. I just want to reference in my comments 2 aspects and then 2 specific proposals. First of all, on service concessions, where I know Councillor Cuthbert has some reservations, but let's be clear, that initiative by Scottish Government, by SITFA, by finance officers throughout Scotland has meant that for Perth and Kinross, we've avoided having to take well over, in fact, over 31 million of quite really unnecessary and harsh cuts. Secondly, on the transformation strategy, we're going to be hearing a lot more about that over coming months. And let me just say to Councillor John Duff, he's absolutely right. He referred to it as our vital transformation programme. Couldn't agree more. And I think it's a great pity that the last transformation programme was dropped in the term of the last administration. I think it's something we should have continued with and we've got to develop. But it's a process that's also got to involve elected members. And it's not micromanagement, but they've got to have strategic oversight and pressure, and we've got to continue with that process. This budget doesn't stand alone. This is about transformation, it's about change, it's about public sector reform. The 2 other points I want to mention. One, I'm very pleased, even though it is only for a year, is on the question of rural libraries. I think we there do need to look at a number of options. That includes certainly community asset transfer. It certainly also includes greater local involvement, if that can be possible through the library service. And indeed, the likes of Friends of Libraries groups being set up, similar to with cemeteries, and we've got Friends of Cemeteries groups. And that's been quite a good initiative, in particular in Crieff with Mark Hunter. And the final point I want to make is with regard to Perth and Kinross Heritage Trust. I'm really pleased that it's been agreed that we are going to overturn the original proposal, which was a 100% cut. It was the termination of the service level agreement. We've reversed that 100%. And next year, and the year after, and the year after that, that agreement will remain in place. And I think that's important, not just for what Heritage Trust does in terms of matters like Doors Open Day or the Community Heritage Scheme or City Heritage Trust, but also what can yet happen with Lower City Mills and the development there. And also, I would add, what might also happen yet with the Lade Corridor. And I think there's a lot of potential there in terms of our ecology agenda, in terms of a green agenda. And I'm very pleased that that decision to reverse that proposal. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Donaldson. Councillor Willie Robertson next, please.
Thank you, Provost. I've probably sat through more council budgets than anyone else in this room, far more than I actually care to remember. And this one I haven't been looking forward to in the least, because we've had some very, very difficult challenges in front of us that face us all, no matter what political party we represent. However, this is the very first time I can remember that we've had almost a collegiate budget. And praise for that must go indeed to the council leader, Councillor Grant Leing. Sorry, it's a long time ago. Councillor Grant Leing. Yeah, because I think it makes such a difference if all political groups are consulted and get an opportunity to have an input in the way that we spend our scant resources. I'm particularly pleased that we've managed to safeguard the public transport links in Kinross, and I'm also very pleased that the Community Investment Fund, which helps so many areas throughout Kinross and other parts of Perth Kinross, has been preserved and maintained. So all in all, I'm very pleased with the budget. I thought that the Scottish Liberal Democrat budget tried to answer as many of the terrible inequality problems that we face as a council, but I'm glad to see that all parties share in the same sort of outlook that we have in trying to help the people that we represent. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Robertson. Councillor Ian Massey next, followed by Councillor Allen.
Thank you, Provost. This SNP budget motion is set in the midst of a cost of living crisis, and it's a crisis of the UK government's making. We have seen a 10% rise in national insurance payments, a 50% rise in energy costs, a £20 a week cut to universal credit, hitting the most vulnerable the hardest, and food prices rising by the day. The people are suffering. Meanwhile, the Conservative UK government have spent billions of pounds extra on vanity projects. The Army's Ajax battle tank, £2.3 billion over budget, and will not be fully in service until 2026, 9 years late. The Royal Navy's 2 aircraft carriers, £2.1 billion over budget, 4 years late, with the Prince of Wales carrier spending more time in dock having to be repaired than it has at sea. The HS rail link was first proposed in 2009 with a projected cost of £37.5 billion. Today, the British government's official review into HS2 have given a projected cost.
Councillor Massey, sorry, the item under review is the council's revenue budget.
I'm getting to that. £106 billion, a mind-boggling increase of £68.5 billion. Many more I could mention, but these three projects are staggering £72.9 billion over budget. Unlike the Westminster government, who can borrow billions of pounds whenever they need to and for whatever takes their fancy, the SNP Holyrood government and Perth and Kinross Council must bring forward a legally balanced budget, with both only having limited borrowing powers. As we have heard, this SNP budget motion before you will bring some relief to the citizens of Perth and Kinross. A couple of the standout proposals to me are £535,000 of funding to tackle poverty to be shared between the Think Yes initiative, child poverty grants, school clothing grants, school holiday clubs, and the continuation of the Warm Spaces initiative. These proposals will help the most disadvantaged in our society. £2.35 million for tackling climate change for the benefit of all our citizens. £600,000 investment in our local communities, financial support for our voluntary organisation Alios. I will let my SNP colleagues expand on what the budget means to them. This is a legally balanced budget that I fully support. Thank you.
In commending the credible Conservative budget proposal to you all, without the absolutely inane political and inane barbs, I'd like to take a few moments to explain the reasoning behind some of the things that we've included in our budget, which is what I thought we were here to talk about today. Firstly, our group has decided to reject the closure of our public conveniences, all of which were targeted with the exception of Pitlochry and Dunkeld. This will save public amenities in places where they are needed. People visit our towns, they park up, and they need to use the toilet. Let's be as welcoming as we can. We are also recommending a project backed by new investment to find new ways to make these premises viable over a longer term, looking at implementing such things as controlled access and alternative ways of cleaning and supplying them. We cannot just arbitrarily close them. This proposal allows us to do the right thing. So let's keep our conveniences open. Conservative Group intend to retain school patroller services in Perth and Kinross where they currently exist, thus rejecting the full proposed savings over the next 2 years. Cutting posts that are currently vacancies is not a part of our plan. Just remember that the lollipop ladies and men are amongst the most loved and respected members of our communities. So let's recruit the vacancies and let's keep them. We've made a proposal on parking services where we will increase free parking periods from 15 minutes to 20 minutes. It will have a negligible impact on our parking revenues. It will also negate the argument that 15 minutes is just not enough. This is long enough to nip out and get your paper and a pint of milk. It's not long enough to go for a coffee and a chat. We've put in a proposal that we would like to propose a scheme whereby 50% grants to a maximum of 75,000 are made available to convert vacant town and city commercial space for new commercial and residential use. This may help replenish some of our empty spaces to be better used. It may also invigorate and encourage others to do likewise. It's well worth the try. I'd like to also talk about our proposal to invest and keep our libraries open. Rather than arbitrarily close them, we also intend to invest in a project to look at alternative ways to retain our libraries throughout Perth and Kinross. We need to be strong on schooling and literacy, both for our kids and for adults. Let's not throw away this important attribute without due diligence and proper consideration. Many people, young and old, still use and enjoy our libraries. It's imperative that we keep them open. Finally, I'd like to say that we're also proposing a small business grant scheme to provide grants for small businesses employing up to 10 people for relevant startup or expansion costs, such as the purchase of equipment or website development, with a 75% contribution from the scheme up to a maximum of £5,000. Let's do what we can to help our small businesses too. I commend these all to the Council. Thank you, Provost.
Thank you, Councillor Allen. I have a point of order from Councillor Brian Leishman.
Thank you, Provost. I'll keep this very brief. It's mainly an appeal to my fellow councillors, and if you could address this to them, that would be fantastic. I'd just really like to call for a bit of manners and decorum in the chambers. I hear some opinions that I agree with, I hear some opinions that I don't agree with, but I make sure that I'm quiet and I hear them anyway. So if you could appeal to the councillors for a bit of manners, that would be great. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Leishman. Yes, all members are reminded that you should be respectful when other people are speaking in line with the Council's standing orders and the Code of Conduct. Next contribution is from Councillor Carr.
Perth and Kinross has always excelled when it comes to supporting our schools and the needs of the pupils. And we should be very proud of the support that we've given at our schools to the many children who do not have English as their first language, and more so recently with the many displaced Ukrainians we have welcomed to Perthshire. As someone that has experienced firsthand on many occasions the frustrations around trying to understand a foreign language, translation services are a critical part of our pupils trying to not only understand and participate in schooling, but also with their integration within the school and in fact into the wider community. It was just to say that I welcome the inclusion of the additional funding to assist both teachers and pupils with translation.
Thank you, Councillor Carr. Councillor David Illingworth.
Thank you, Provost. I'd like to talk about two aspects of the Conservative budget, the Perth Kinross Heritage Trust and the Skills Passport. Since 1988, the Heritage Trust has been achieving a wide remit encompassing historic building, conservation, archaeology and access to the historic environment. Removal of the SLA relating to the provision of statutory archaeological services would impact the long-term viability of the Trust and the development of the Lois City Mills project. The Skills Passport, is a successful scheme that gets unemployed people into well-paid job and all the benefits that brings to families and to the Perth and Kinross economy. To sum up, I'm proud of the Conservative amendment, and these aspects will support both the Heritage Trust and the Skills Passport. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lillingworth. Councillor Craigali.
Despite the incredibly hard decisions that all groups have been forced into by the Scottish Government's underfunding of local authorities, making sure that funding for those projects most valued by our communities is crucial. The Community Investment Fund is a perfect way of doing that, and the Conservative group are committed to increasing its funding by £400,000. In an age when the Scottish Government is looking to centralise power in Edinburgh, doing our part to redistribute some of that influence back into our towns, villages, as well as Perth City is key to ensuring that their priorities are delivered on. No one knows more about our communities than those that live in them, and no one is better placed to guide funding than those same residents. Anyone involved in community projects in any capacity will know how hard it is to access funding in today's international economic environment, and it is right that we are giving back to our communities to try and plug at least some of that gap. It's also worth noting that the SNP's failure to support the care and repair service properly in the coming year is in direct contradiction to most other groups. It's borderline unthinkable that a group which proclaims such moral supremacy in terms of support for vulnerable people could implement what could be such a brutal budget position that so negatively impacts people in dire need of assistance on home adaptations, advice and repairs. I'm also incredibly disappointed to see the SNP proposing a reduction in the spending on flood risk studies and investigations. I'm sure that very few councillors in this chamber have managed to avoid dealing with any flooding issues in their casework, and it is perplexing that the administration are happy to cut the funding for risk studies. It is little more than sticking their fingers in their ears and shutting their eyes. Quite frankly, the Scottish Government have presided over economic calamity for 16 years, and that serial failure is starting to bear its rotten fruit, with the terrifying reality of either a failed economic minister or a failed transport and health minister the likely next cab off the rank. It's lucky they're not about that at an end then as well, so thank you very much.
I've already said it though, Provost.
I'm being reasonably lenient. I'm asking everyone to be considerate of others and keep in mind what I have already asked members to do, which is leave the national politics to the national politicians and stick to the local matters. There is some degree of commentary around the actual budget contribution from central government, which is reasonable, which I have been trying to allow. Other matters are not reasonable and not pertinent to the paper, and therefore I would ask members to refrain from getting into those comments. Okay? I'm really not looking to get to a back and forth, Councillor McEwen.
If information is quoted within the paper that is written by the officers in front of us, you can use that information.
Yes, if there is information in the papers in front of you, that is pertinent to the paper. Councillor Liz Barrett.
Thank you, Provost. I'd like to add my thanks to the Leader of the Council for his inclusive approach in amending the budget motion, and especially to tackling poverty and climate change and giving hope to those who are struggling. Thank you for listening to everyone, Grant. I do have concerns that we can't always just do what's popular, and I honestly believe that our council tax should be higher. We just can't keep dipping into reserves as proposed by the Tories to the tune of over £5 million over the next 3 years to be able to trumpet about an unsustainably low council tax. I do hope we can be more realistic next year. I'd also like to give huge thanks to Scott, Claire, Stuart, Craig and all the officers for all the work that's gone into this budget, the papers and all the preparations for today and all the running around today, and all the support to the budget review groups. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Councillor Barrett. Apologies, we're having some technical issues up the front here. Bailey Ahern next, please.
Thank you very much, Provost, and we'll see how far I get before you start me in my speech. That wasn't the Provost. Well, here we go again on the back of another funding disaster from the Scottish Government, and this is the worst yet. We've heard numerous times from John Swinney that there was no more money from the Scottish Government, but last week he found another 100 million down the back of the settee. I suggest he looks down the back of the rest of the furniture in Butte House now it's been cleared and gives the local authorities what they need to continue to deliver services. Councillor Massey and his listing of shipping, he missed off the ferries. All right, I'll miss all that bit. I'll go straight to our bit. Right, I want to continue to talk about parts of our Scottish Conservative budget amendment, which we put together in a way that helps out local communities and some of the most vulnerable and troubled people within those communities. And I welcome the leader, Councillor Grant Lang, in including some of the ideas from all the groups in his amended motion. In our budget last year, I asked for, and it was agreed, we put in £30,000 for RASAC and for Women's Aid to help with the increase in domestic violence and the increase in rape that arose from the lockdown and pandemic. Both these organisations continue to see an increase for their services, and we need to help the survivors, both men and women, that need their help, not just to get through the initial ordeal, but also to get through the lengthy recovery and hopefully a successful court process to get a prosecution. And for that, we put in £40,000 funding for each organisation for the next 3 years. I'm also glad that the other groups also put this in their amendment as well. Anchor House is a mental health hub where the Nuke, which runs the Evolve project, which helps men with 24-hour counselling support with volunteers as well as a safe place. However, this help has been reduced over the last few months due to the lack of funding, and it would still continue to provide a 24-hour support if the funding was available, which is why we have put in £150,000 for the Nuke and £150,000 for the Lighthouse project, also run out of the same premise in our budget. The Lighthouse project is for anyone over the age of 12 who's at risk of self-harm or suicide. These services are invaluable, and it is essential that both of these are able to run 24 hours. Anyone that is connected with them will tell you that not running the 24 hours is having an adverse effect, and those that turn up for help are being turned away and told to come back the next day. Not always an easy thing to do when you're reaching out for help. The funding we put in is only for 1 year at the moment, but it is hoped that it will allow them to look at their governance structure and broader opportunities moving forward, and to help them look for external funding during the next year. We've also put in £50,000 to support mental health groups. Without support from the community and charities, a lot of this support would not happen and could not be carried out either by local authorities or the NHS. And I want to touch on the £5,000 funding for Armed Forces and Veterans Champion to assist in the implementation of the covenant, which is now enshrined in law. Perth and Kinross signed up to the covenant and also in 2021 received the Employers Gold Recognition Award for the acknowledgement of the way the Council recognises and works with veterans, adult volunteers and reservists that work with Council. Hello. Hello. Is that better? Yes. Where did I get to? So in 2021, received the Employers Recognition Gold Award for the acknowledgement of the way the Council recognises and works with veterans, adult volunteers and reservists that work for the Council, and also for the greater work the Armed Forces Champion and a small number of officers do for our residents that also come under the Covenant. This small amount is similar to several other local authorities and will enable meetings to be held as well as provide small grants if required. And I'm glad, and thanks very much, Councillor Lane, for putting that in as a recurring basis. Thank you, Provost, and I will be supporting the Scottish Conservative amendment.
Thank you, Bailey Ahern. Councillor Richard Waters, followed by Councillor Ian McPherson.
Thank you, Provost. Fellow councillors, a few times here we've heard about the Conservatives mentioning how their important local communities are. And one of my major concerns regarding their budget is they're cutting the rural bus services. They're saying they're cutting 20% of the local bus services throughout the council area. Given that most of these rural buses, these bus services that are subsidised are rural buses, with the only exceptions outside the city of Perth are the X7 and X56. I'm wondering what one of these services will be at risk with this severe cut. These rural bus services are vital to our rural towns and communities, often providing access to key services and shops with the added benefit of helping us to meet our net zero ambitions. I, along with my fellow councillor from Kinross, know the costs when buses are cut, i.e. the 202 service running along by Crookie Devon, Pall Mall and Blair and Gone when it was cut. And we tried to get somebody else to come in to take over the service, and we had to find extra money within the council to fund that service. As part of the SNP budget, we're not only restoring the cut and protecting the service that's in there, we're also putting an extra 165,000 into local rural buses in the area, protecting this essential 202 route, which provides key services for residents there. This will also open up opportunities for the Glenfarg Community Transport Group, who have already set up a crucial bus route connecting Glenfarg with Kinross and looking to continue and develop the route to provide a more enhanced service. A group that fully understands the importance of a good bus service for the local community to help deal with the cost of living crisis, help us on our path to net zero, and provide a crucial connection for residents to access vital services. A group with the community ambition and desire to eventually provide a service using electrical vehicles, and have already had a chat with local businesses on supporting this. I would like to thank officers for the work already completed and ongoing works on decarbonising the council's building stock. Improving energy efficiencies throughout our schools and council buildings is imperative to allow us to reach both our 2030 and 2045 decarbonisation goals. Releasing the £2 million within the SNP budget, along with potential match funding, will help accelerate the work already identified in the Climate Change Action Plan, helping us to meet our net zero ambitions as a council, with the added benefit that we will also see financial savings to the council and reduced energy costs. And this is especially so given the current cost of energy, and help fulfils our commitment to lead by example in addressing the climate emergency. In line with the Scottish Government's nature restoration funding aimed at restoring and protecting our nature and biodiversity, we will also be providing 75,000 aimed at supporting biodiversity projects in our open spaces. Finally, I would like to thank Councillor Tom McEwen and Councillor Colin Stewart for the work they have put into proposals to provide direct funding for our local area partnerships of 200,000 and to continue the important funding of the Community Investment Fund of 400,000. Funding that will allow local communities to address inequalities within their own areas. I commend the SNP budget.
Thank you, Councillor Waters. Councillor McPherson.
Thank you, Provost. My comment was just to say, as a councillor, that I'm very aware of the concerns expressed by parents as senior pupils prepare for forthcoming exams, and I therefore welcome the funding of £100,000 to open all secondary schools across Perth and Kinross during the Easter holidays in order to facilitate additional study to help mitigate the impact of lost learning to pupils through strike action. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Braun, followed by Councillor Rebeck.
Thank you, Provost. It may be the only thing agreed on today by both members and officers that this has been one of the most challenging budgets ever. And before saying more, I would like to give my thanks to all officers who have helped with supporting information for our BRG, to Mr. Mackenzie, who must have been at his wit's end having explained the service agreement concession so many times, and especially Mr. Walker Scott, who has been the conduit for that information and for the constant changing of figures and preparation of draft documents. Our amendment, as presented, has at its heart our communities, their health and safety, and as a result, we have rejected many unpalatable savings in executive summaries. However, we have made a point of introducing new proposals, and I would like to mention just three. Firstly, we have allocated funding of £40,000 to Bloom Groups and Friends of Cemeteries. Our cemeteries are hallowed grounds in which loved ones lie, and it is right that they are respectful of that. And our various Bloom Groups ensure our communities have a vision of colour in the spring and summer. Both play their part and are made up of dedicated volunteers, and it is right that we give them support where we can. Secondly, we have proposed a continuation of the Community Investment Fund, allocating a further £400,000 for another year. The popularity of this fund has been well documented many times, community groups benefiting from grants approved by local residents. It is community empowerment at its best and most successful. Finally, our ALIOs. Undoubtedly, the inflationary pressures affecting this council have also hit them whilst they struggle to recover from the effects of the COVID pandemic. With this in mind, we have rejected the reduction in contract fees entirely. And in addition, we have also, as we've heard, allocated funds for the libraries and to investigate how those library resources can be improved. We've also allocated £50,000 as a project to investigate the possible sharing of back office services between the three ALIOs, which could create much needed savings. And finally, we have proposed funds totaling £710,000 to go to Lau to assist in retaining and running both the Dewar Centre and Perth Leisure Pool for another year, where they have discussed even possible closures this coming year. These are important facilities for both people in Perth and the surrounds. To support these and all other commitments in our amendment, we have settled on a council tax rise of 4% and provisional rises of 4% in the 2 following years. This rise is not out of line with other local authorities struggling to produce a balanced budget and remains one of the lowest in Scotland. It recognises that family budgets are under strain, but also notes the coming pressures on the council in the future 2 years. Maintaining healthy reserves was the mainstay of the previous administration, and this has ensured that reserves are now available to help in these difficult circumstances. I recall too that there was a suggestion of other groups to use the COVID reserve in full last year, and I'm sure on reflection they are pleased that we resisted that move. Provost, I stated that at the beginning that this was the most challenging budget ever, and not just for PKC. Every local authority in Scotland has been crying out for increased funding to a government that just turns a deaf ear. They claim there's no more, yet they are in receipt of block grants which are at a record high since devolution occurred. Given their mismanagement of public funds since coming into office, perhaps we should not be surprised. We have all been forced to adopt the service agreement concession as detailed, which has injected £17 million into the budget balance. If it were not for that, imagine the devastating cuts that we would be witnessing today. Nonetheless, this failure to give financial support has resulted in severe, possibly irreversible damage to local authorities throughout Scotland, to a point where the very fabric of what a local authority is, what services it provides, has been pulled apart. However, Provost, and I have mentioned this before, what has been different this year is the threat from the Scottish Government of financial sanctions if we refuse to toe the line. The reasons are irrelevant. What is important that this represented a clear and present threat to local democracy, and we should all be alarmed at that. Finally, having made my criticism, I am duty bound, as always, to thank the leader of the administration for incorporating several items from our amendment, important items, and I thank him for that. Thank you, Provost, and I commend our Scottish Conservative amendment.
Thank you, Councillor Braun. Councillor Rebeck, followed by Councillor Shires.
Thank you, Provost. This has been a difficult budget, and it's been difficult because of rising costs. Perth Kinross Council have had an increase of nearly 8% actually this year, a lot of which is ring-fenced, and there is a legitimate argument over the balance of democracy between local democracy and the national government trying to deliver in good faith manifesto commitments that the majority of the nation has voted for. But let's be clear, this is a difficult budget because of rising costs. Whether it's post-COVID recovery, the war in Ukraine, Brexit, or general Westminster economic incompetence is a debate for another day, although I think it's probably a large dose of all four. It's been a difficult budget for education and children's services too, and I don't and won't shy away from one or two of the tough decisions that we have had to make. But there's been no cuts in teacher numbers, no cuts in schools and in-school support staff, no cuts in actual school crossing patrollers, no cuts in swimming lessons, no cuts in free music provision, no cuts in educational psychologists, and I could go on. Furthermore, we've increased funding for the virtual campus in order to broaden even further curriculum choice for our learners as a complement to, and very much not a substitute for, in-person learning. And we continue with a substantial investment in holiday activity clubs all the way through to and including Easter holidays in 2024 to the tune of £120,000. As Learning and Families convener, I've been deliberately neutral on teacher strikes. I understand that we must value teachers. We must value teachers if we are to make sure our young people are numerate and literate. We must value our teachers if we are to deal with adverse childhood experiences and the early interventions required to deal with them. We must value our teachers to support inclusion and additional support need. We must value our teachers to reduce the poverty-related attainment gap. And we must value our teachers to ensure a cohesive society. Equally, we must value our in-school support staff, our ELPs, our classroom assistants, and everybody else that works in our schools. However, I also understand the limitations of Scottish Government spending capabilities within a fixed budget. So I don't envy the people currently trying to square that particular circle, even as we speak, I believe. It is my responsibility as convener to ensure the best possible learning opportunities for our senior pupils as we move near our important exams. So I'm pleased SNP colleagues have supported £100,000 investment in Easter holiday study support in all of our secondary schools this April to help mitigate the impact of learning lost to pupils as a result of strike action. And I want to make it very clear that this administration will reinvest every single penny we save as an unintended consequence of strike action back into children and families. Finally, as Ward Councillor, I do welcome the collaborative way we go about the business of serving our communities of Perth City North. And I know that a bespoke community warden for Tulloch and Letham is something that has been specifically asked for by the community in an attempt to address substance abuse and the antisocial behaviour that results from it. So I'm delighted to support Councillors Massey and Leishman in seeing this delivered. Despite the challenges, this is a good budget and I will be supporting it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Rebeck. Councillor Shires, followed by Councillor Frampton.
Thank you, Provost. As others have noted, this budget setting process has been very difficult. Our settlement from the Scottish Government isn't fair, and it's clear from independent analysis of the settlement that more could have been provided to us by the Scottish Government to support our essential services. I was grateful that the Leader of the Council agreed to our request to lobby the Government for a fairer settlement, but that has fallen on deaf ears. I'm somewhat taken aback that after all the protestations of the SNP in opposition, as soon as they're in administration, they accept a reduction in school crossing patrollers by not seeking to fill the vacancies. I accept these are difficult and being very parochial, this includes outside Blairgowrie High School, but it is something we need to address. We accept that it's parental responsibility to get children safely to school, and we're trying to get children to walk or cycle to school and out of cars. To be clear, the SNP administration is not delivering a review of the safety at these locations, nor investment in crossing points that allow people to cross safely 24/7 as we sought to do and invested £1 million, just a flat removal of the vacant posts. This despite glossy advertising on social media before the elections where hashtag #PKSNP said that an SNP council will eliminate cuts to school crossing patrollers. On another case of do as we do, not as we say, that's wrong, of do as we say, not as we do. I shall await the review of the Perth secondary school estate as outlined in the SNP budget. Given the resistance that they had to the school estate review undertaken by the previous administration and the vitriol directed towards the review, I'll be interested to see how they'll present this to parents, staff and pupils. Because to quote, this is not something they chose to share with the voters before the election in May. Not my words, but yours, Councillor Rebick, in 2018. Today, the Scottish Conservative Group amendment continues with the themes we promoted whilst in administration. I'm delighted to see that the SNP have embraced the Community Investment Fund. I have to say I was surprised, given the negativity with which some members of your group have responded to this over the past 5 years. Our proposals included taking this further and allocated direct funding to communities to work in partnership with them. I warmly welcome these proposals, and those of us who regularly attend our community councils and other meetings know how much work is going on to develop local action plans and take forward aspirations of communities. Our proposals for children, young people and families focus on helping with the recovery from the pandemic. COVID hit all of us, but our children and young people are those who are hit the hardest. We will invest the money unspent because of the ongoing teachers' strike action, which I very much hope can be swiftly resolved, directly into support for children and young people, including study support and youth engagement, supporting the excellent work done by our youth work teams. I'm pleased that the Leader of the Council has accepted the requirement for translation tools and equipment to be included in his motion, an important resource which will make a real difference. We also recognise the work being done to help individuals and families to be more resilient and to ensure that food isn't wasted. Bailey Ahern and I have been hugely impressed by the work carried out by Giraffe, and our motion seeks to help them expand their traineeship programme and develop community kitchen projects. I can very much recommend a visit to the Giraffe Cafe and would urge you to familiarise yourself with the work they do, innovative and exceptional. Our budget amendment builds on the progressive, fair and affordable principles we promoted in administration, and I would support this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Shires. Councillor Frampton, followed by Councillor Grant-Stewart.
Thank you, Provost. As a member of the administration group, I welcome the funding that's been made available to RASAC, Women's Aid, Buttons and Bow, mental health support, and also to fund Breast Buddies, which is very important to the support of mothers and babies across Perth and Kinross. As Learning and Families Vice Convener, I'm pleased to support this budget, which helps support the educational needs of all children and young people across the school estates of Perth and Kinross. I welcome the extra funding towards the virtual campuses, which will benefit many of our young people. I'm also happy there will be no cuts made to educational psychologist posts, as our children's mental, physical and well-being is extremely important to a happy learning environment. Thank you.
We are living in a climate emergency. It's not fake, it's real. And thinking about our budget and biodiversity, I would like to echo some elements raised by Councillor Drysdale this morning. The Conservative budget is inconsistent. We, in our budget proposal, have linked elements throughout the budget, so that makes it cohesive. So I would recommend the SNP budget. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stewart. Councillor Tom McEwen, followed by Councillor Ken Harvey.
Thank you, Provost. First, I'd like to thank officers involved in writing the papers and helping with the BRG groups. Without your expert help and advice, us as councillors would have no chance of getting any sort of budget together. So thank you very much to all the officers involved in the budget process. Yes, we've got bad economic circumstances that we live in. We have no control over the macroeconomics of the United Kingdom. Flat budgets to the public sector, across the public sector and every part of the public sector is the way things seem to be. And we as a council have had to draw up a budget coping with the same circumstances that others have been put in themselves. The 7.9% increase that we have, I actually think to a level-minded person looking at all the influences on our budget will see that this is actually a reasonably decent settlement, but only given the circumstances that we're in. From day one of this SNP administration, we've said that we will tackle the cost of living crisis and poverty as our first priority. Our agreed 5-year corporate plan also talks about the importance of climate and sustainability and providing funding for what is needed for our communities. Continued funding for warm spaces as warm welcome places where people can get help and advice. Child poverty grants and Think Yes funds, school clothing grants and continued holiday hunger funding. Extra biodiversity funding for planting trees and flowers for pollinators in our open spaces. Rural EV charging points, providing infrastructure where commercial companies won't. Free hire of grass football pitches to encourage and remove barriers to participation in sport. Increased funding for virtual school campus, increasing subject choice and a geographically large council area. Funding for mental health groups in our communities. The renewed funding for the SIF panels and the starved of money that the local action partnerships have been during the last administration. And as convener of Housing and Social Wellbeing, I look forward to the negotiated paper that will come to my committee that will set out the criteria in which this money can be issued. One disappointment I've seen in the comparative budgets was with the criminal justice support and the Conservative budget not wishing to actually fully fund the criminal justice service. I find this really surprising given Chris Ahern's input and Bailey Ahern's input into this service and how important he must know the monies are. Ensuring people are released from prison in an organised, constructive and organised way is one of the most important roles this council does to ensure that reoffending doesn't happen. And to mitigate that money and to leave it out, I feel is a huge mistake within their budget. Provost, as convener of the Housing and Social Wellbeing Committee, it's been a pleasure recently to congratulate our housing team on their award-winning efforts to tackle homelessness in Perth and Kinross. Our home first approach and all that goes with the model service for the rest of Scotland. Recently, we've had communications with the Scottish Government Cabinet Secretary about our homelessness service, and this interaction with us will help national discussions at COSLA later this month. It is no surprise then that we have rejected any savings from this service so that they continue to be the best in the UK. So, Provost, I support the SNP amendment to the revenue budget as a well thought out collaborative budget aimed to support our communities, especially those who are most vulnerable during this cost of living crisis. I hope this chamber can come together to support it too. Thank you.
Councillor Ken Harvey.
Thank you, Provost. First of all, as a new councillor, I'd just like to thank all the budget team, including the officers, everyone else involved, and politicians on both sides. The amount of work that was involved really surprised me, and to get to this stage is excellent. I'm going to keep it brief. My colleagues on both sides of the aisles have commented on various measures in the budget, but the one I'd like to bring to attention and something that affects my ward is the new £90,000 provision to create an anti-social fly tipping team. As everyone that lives in the county is aware, this is a scourge in the county, and it seems to particularly affect the cars, and it's an issue that we've had problems with going forward. And rather than just talk about it, we've decided to create a team to solve this problem, and hopefully this team will be effective and will eliminate or reduce the problem of fly tipping in and around the county. Just generally, as far as the budget is concerned, I appreciate all the work done, as I said above, and I fully support this budget. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Harvey. Bailey Williamson, followed by Councillor Forbes.
Thank you very much, Provost. At a time when there are increasing numbers of children and adults whose lives are becoming dominated by the use of mobile phones, I therefore welcome the funding that has been included in the SNP budget to remove pitch hire fees and park charges for community groups. There is growing evidence that a growing number of women and girls are becoming involved in football, and I now hope that this encourages more women and gents teams to set up and support a wider participation in support, or use our parks to become more active. Thank you.
Thank you, Bailey Williamson. Councillor Forbes.
Yeah, thanks, Provost. Sorry, I wasn't quite expecting to be going yet. I was losing track of what was going on there. But I'm really pleased at the way this budget has gone. I mean, it has been quite consensual. We started off this morning with the Leader of the Council suggesting a consensual budget and that you'd work across the chamber. And I was pleased that he did that. And actually, since then, he's gone even further. So I'm grateful to Councillor Ling for doing that. But this morning, in his seconding, his deputy attack dog immediately went on the offensive by blaming the Conservatives for all of the world's problems. Followed this afternoon by Councillor Massey ranting on and on about things of no consequence to Perth Kinross Council. I think despite your best efforts, Provost, even you weren't able to stop his rant. But let's go back to the start of today's meeting. Let's remind ourselves of what Councillor Duff said at the start. We have millions of pounds to play with thanks to decisions the Conservatives made last year, a point Councillor Drysdale seems to have forgotten. Councillor Duff also reminded us this morning that the devolution settlement is higher than it has ever been. One has to wonder where the money has gone. And Provost, if I was now to list all the various options of where it was wasted, then I'm sure you'd cut me off. So I will simply say this. Are you going to cut me off? Are you absolutely sure about that? So in a world where the SNP won't even allow the media to attend the debate between their leadership candidates. Okay. So the little bit of extra funding that we have got from the Scottish Government is, as has already been said by the Leader of the Council and Councillor Rebeck, ring-fenced for specific priorities set by the Scottish Government, further eroding local democracy. But Provost, I will now stop criticising the SNP. No one wants to kick someone when they're down. They're doing a perfectly good job of that themselves. But as always, the Conservative group have put forward a credible, sensible and balanced budget, taking into account the situation we find ourselves in. Councillor Donaldson referenced the fact we are able to put forward a balanced budget at a reasonably low council tax increase, yet another positive outcome from the previous Conservative administration. On talking on balance, I really do wish we could have balanced the budget for the next 2 years, but under the current settlement, that's simply not possible. However, we live in a changing world. Without a doubt, we'll be facing a different set of challenges next year. By the end of March, we'll have a new First Minister, a situation no one would have expected just 2 short weeks ago. And my prediction, Provost, for what it's worth, will... I was going to predict the lottery numbers for the Saturday, but... So you don't want my prediction about yet another First Minister at the end of the year? No, you don't want that one. Okay, fair enough. So Councillor Waters has made reference to our change of funding to rural bus services, a valid point to make, but what he failed to mention is the commitment that we've made to community-based transport initiatives, a far more sustainable way to run a transport system. But Provost, we must find a different way to do this. The costs of some of these services are absolutely horrendous. Just one example I'll give you. Service 115 Comrie to St Fillan's is costing the people of Perth and Kinross £139.12 per passenger. Every time someone gets on that bus, the people of Perth and Kinross pay £139.12. That is not sustainable. Something has to change. Moving on, there can be no doubt about the commitment I have to our area's road networks, and as convener, I led on the biggest single investment this council has made into our roads. The outcome of that work was that we moved up from position 20 to position 14 in the league table of all Scottish local authorities. And there's no doubt that one way we can protect our roads is to keep water away from them. Our commitment to more frequent emptying of gullies will do that, and by allocating a substantial sum to additional gully cleaning, we can help keep the roads in the good condition that we left them in. And you know, Provost, democracy doesn't need to be difficult. All you need to do is listen to your constituents. One of the areas I get calls about, and I'm sure you do as well, all the time, is about verge cutting. This is currently happening once per year with a proposal to reduce that further. We've rejected that proposal and we will increase verge cutting to twice per year. Footpaths, another area I'm heavily committed to, and I want to praise the work done by locals in Errol, how we're building a path between Errol and Grange, and I'd like to see some more of that. Our funding will allow more of these things to continue. And I'm delighted to see the SNP match our commitment to the Community Investment Fund. This has proven to be very popular. I was quite surprised at Councillor McEwen supporting this, though, because when Blair and Bloom asked him for a letter of support for funding for a community garden, he refused to help. And an email released under FOI from him to Blair and Bloom says this: "I cannot proactively support use of funds that don't directly challenge the cost of living crisis so many in our communities will face this winter. I have never been involved by choice in the SIF fund, and I won't be for this final round of handouts." So I'm delighted to see he has changed his mind a bit too late for Blair and Bloom. And Provost, before you cut me off in my next and final paragraph, I'll just finish there by saying I will support the Conservative budget.
Thank you, Provost, and thank you to, like everyone else, officers for their tireless work and patience, probably, in helping us to put together these budget proposals. I'd like to also thank all the other contributors this afternoon to this budget debate. Some of them quite entertaining, maybe not exactly factual, but entertaining nonetheless. You'll be pleased to hear, Provost, that my contribution will be mercifully brief. I just want to reiterate my support for the SNP budget. It has addressed some of the key issues we identified when we first came into administration. We're investing in anti-poverty measures and initiatives to help mitigate the cost of living crisis that many of our citizens are facing, and I'm sure we're very welcome to them. Our budget also recognises the importance of addressing the climate emergency that we're all facing, and others have spoken in some detail about those measures. And I'm also quite pleased as one of the councillors who represents Perth Kinross Council on the Integrated Joint Board that our budget has incorporated funding suggestions and initiatives on health related issues, and I look forward to working with the Health and Social Care Partnership to ensure that this funding is properly administered and delivered. But other than that, I think this is an excellent collaborative budget for this council as a whole. I'm sure our citizens will be very pleased to see that we can actually work in collaboration, and I commend this budget to the council. Thank you, Provost.
Thank you, Councillor McCall. Councillor Welsh, you just made it in there under the deadline, so you can come in now.
Thank you, Provost. I welcome the £250,000 that has been pulled forward to support the rollout of EV charging in our rural areas, and welcome the opportunities to engage with officials to ensure that's done in a way that will provide a reliable and easily accessed service. It's important that no one's left behind in rural areas, particularly residents, small businesses, but also the very important tourism economy of which Perth and Kinross thrives on. New funding to unlock £2 million of investment to decarbonise council buildings, reduce the impact of high energy prices, is also to be welcomed, and unlocking this funding with relatively small amounts of money to ensure that we mitigate the worst effects of climate change is to be applauded. Finally, as a new councillor in a post-COVID environment where it's become much more difficult, old systems of collaboration have broken down. I welcome the very much collaborative and hard work which has been shown by the leader of the council, Grant Lang, and my other colleagues in both my own group and the wider chamber. It's refreshing and welcoming, and it's something that I was concerned about prior to putting myself forward as a councillor. This is a balanced and fair budget delivered during very challenging times, and I'm delighted to support it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wells. Okay, members, I have no other indications of contributions, and therefore I'm going to move to summing up, and the summing up goes in reverse order. Therefore, Bailey, you have the first opportunity to sum up.
I'm happy to confirm as I start, Provost, that this speech contains 100% local material. That's actually in contrast, though, to our school meals provision, which the SNP, when in opposition, cried out to have brought back to our area. In years past, I also frequently applauded the SNP for their unwavering support of PH2O. But where is that, and where are the local school meals now, I ask you? Turning the other way a moment, when in administration, the Conservatives talked a great game about not spending the reserves, and on occasion took school crossing patroller cuts. Now, the Conservatives are plundering the reserves and, thankfully, protecting the school crossing patrollers. The centre of power in this room has moved from one end to the other, but not much else has changed. This Labour amendment is different, though. We're balanced in all 3 years, and it's the only one to achieve that balanced position. This is the 6th budget meeting I've been to, and I'd encourage the public and press who are good enough to watch these meetings to always read the last page of the amendments first. That page shows where the money comes from. I can tell you, it's really easy to put the tax up and create room for a couple of thousand here or a couple of thousand there on eye-catching priorities.
What's more, it makes it really easy for your party colleagues to put a wee social media graphic together to boast about the allocation at the next by-election. What's really hard work, though, colleagues, is to take the real political choices necessary to fully balance a council budget while protecting the most vulnerable. Back to the amendments. 4, 4, 4. Those are the panel scores out of 10 for this Tory budget, and also coincidentally its tax rate. I do commend it, though, for keeping the school crossing patrollers and for the path money, which we heard is so desperately needed by our rural communities. Also, they're back to supporting the visitor rangers, but with a wee haircut. Douglas Ross must have been in the room for those BRGs. First, they launched the visitor rangers, then they voted against it. Now it's back, but it has a £25,000 haircut with no explanation as to why. Presumably the 25,000 was needed elsewhere. Perhaps, to be fair, it went to keeping the leisure pool open, which is something we commend. However, on the downside, there's nearly £250,000 cut from home to school transport in years 2 and 3. Strangely, it sits under a heading of helping young people achieve their full potential. Hopefully their full potential is as Nordic walking champions, Provost. It took a while, but you got it. The Conservative amendment isn't even balanced in year 2 and 3. If 2 from Labour can do that, why can the combined brain power of 14 Conservatives not achieve a balanced budget? The Tory budget dips into council reserves by £800,000 in year 3, while Labour is putting 3.1 million into reserves. Thank you, though, to Councillor Lane for working so collaboratively and incorporating the community safety wardings, the CAB funding. Doing so without the promise of a vote from us shows real commitment to put the people of Perth before party politics. There is much more that unites us than divides us. However, we do have differing visions, and those deserve a proper airing. We shared our 4 tests with the SNP to win our vote, and although we're pleased some elements have been included, we're not in a position to vote for a motion that doesn't include that full vision. That's a vision where PH2O remains fully funded. Not only are the SNP content with not funding it, they're also leaving Live Active Leisure with so little money that they might not be able to keep the leisure side of the existing Perth pool open. Then, on the critical final page of the paperwork, we see that 150k is being taken from the PH2O earmarked reserve, which was set aside to, and I'll quote the report here, fund the future design and business operating model of the PH2O project. I've not had sight of what the SNP will bring in their capital motion at this juncture, but it's not looking rosy for families who are fans of swimming. How are people to believe that the project will ever come back if the SNP are raiding the design and development budget? I was surprised too to see that the SNP are removing a post from flooding, and that's already been covered. The choice is clear here. The SNP budget puts money into roads and more into roads. With Labour, you get education, housing and PH2O. What a difference our 5 million will make to council housing. The first line in the playbook for fading politicians reads, when things are going wrong, convince the populations it's the fault of external forces. And we've had plenty of that today. The Tories talk the talk about fiscal responsibility, but don't walk the walk in power. Now, from the opposition benches, they propose diving even further into the reserves than the base proposals. There's a black hole to the tune of just over 4 million at the end of the year in their proposals. The Labour one is balanced, and what's more, we'll have seen our council housing stock grow and improve to the tune of 5 million. Looking at the election material from the SNP in the lead up to last year's election, these budgets are fundamentally lacking in ambition, but then maybe we the voters were the fools. This was, after all, a local election fought about flags. But as we all know, flags don't keep people warm, flags don't feed people, and those elected on flags certainly don't write good budgets. No more SNP shirking or Tory tinkering. It's time to rebuild. Thank you.
Thank you, Provost. Provost, fellow members, in summing up on behalf of the independent group, I want to refer back to the 4 principles we had in mind when drawing up our budget. To support the excellent work in the third sector in our communities, the need to transform the council and become more efficient, the need to protect frontline services and the need to think about the future in the longer term beyond the budget immediately in front of us today. The independent budget does all of that. But I'd like to recognise that there are some good, interesting ideas in the budgets of all groups here today. And don't worry, I'm saving copies of all of them to scour for ideas for next year. One that I would like to comment on in particular is the funding proposed by the Leader of the Council to support the invaluable mental health crisis support provided at the Nuke, which has recently been recognised as exemplary in a public report on the subject. Having had the chance over the recess to look at the document comparing all groups' budgets, I realise that the independent budget rejects more pressures than any other, rejects more cuts than any other, produces more new savings than any other, and the second highest level of new prioritised spending, all while proposing a lower level of council tax than any other in each of the 3 years. I just say that because I realise I'm not going to get into the political toing and froing across the chamber, but I think I realise that we may have taxed officers with more questions and requests for briefings than I'd appreciated. So in addition to my earlier comments, I'd like to also call out for thanks Caroline, Fraser, Jim, Greg and Craig, Stuart, Lisa, Jackie, Donna and Claire, and all the people in their teams and in the wider organisation who've helped and contributed. And I know that they will all have had to work equally hard before that on the officer proposals before us today. So turning to them, just briefly, I'd like to thank the officers for including in this budget so many proposals which various elected members have brought forward in previous years but have not yet been successful. I'd like to thank the Leader of the Council for accepting the proposals he listed at the start of the afternoon, not only from our group, but from all groups. As Councillor Robertson noted, that's a very constructive and collegiate way to proceed. And sorry, Councillor Robertson and others have noted, that's a very constructive and collegiate way to proceed. And I do think that the best proposals from every group will make a difference to the people that we are elected to represent. In conclusion, as I said earlier, the independent group is ready to help with the task of transformation before all of us in any way we can, but we are also here ready and willing to work across any political divide in the best interests of the residents and taxpayers of Perth and Kinross, and I commend our budget to you all.
Thank you, Councillor Stewart. Councillor John Duff to sum up.
Thank you, Provost. Firstly, just to clarify Bailey's comments on visitor rangers, the Scottish Conservatives did not oppose the visitor ranger service during last year. We asked for the decision on making it permanent to be deferred until today. And I'm sure if he reflects on what was said at the time, he will agree with me that that is an accurate statement of our position. Provost, we've heard various comments about national funding today. However, no amount of SNP bluster can hide the fact that the SNP Scottish Government has underfunded Scottish local authorities for years, as confirmed recently by Audit Scotland. Let's not forget, Councillor Drysdale, that all local authorities, including the SNP-led ones, have backed complaints to the Deputy First Minister over the budget settlement, despite the record funding allocation from the UK Government. And that is why we are where we are financially. Provost, I do want to take the opportunity to thank the Leader of the Council for including a small number of the great ideas contained in our budget into his motion. I think enough has been said on the details of our budget amendment, and I don't intend to revisit them here. Our budget amendment is a sensible, credible and affordable one. It supports children and families, the economy, communities, the environment and the vulnerable, particularly those suffering from mental health issues. And I commend the Scottish Conservative budget amendment to colleagues. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Duff. Councillor Grantling to sum up his motion.
Thanks, Provost. I'll be mercifully brief. I've had two chances to speak. I did send an email to officers and everybody last night about midnight, and they were probably still up because they were responding to me at that time. I was having coffee and watching the TV. They were probably working, but I just saw everybody that sent that email to, and if it's cascaded down, I thank you for your help, as all elected members have already. I could spend a little time rebutting some of the things that have come forward here, but I'll only go over 2 or 3 of them. The PH2O money that you referred to, you'll see, was to do a full review of condition and suitability of all leisure facilities across Perth and Kinross. And then once we know what we're going to spend our money at, instead of throwing it wildly at something, we will target where it should be spent on swimming pools, etc., across the local authority, and that is explicit in the papers. School crossing patrollers, vacancies. Talking about fiscal responsibility, we weren't going to continue like the previous administration and continue to pay Tayside contracts year on year for posts that were never filled, and the fact that they were not advertising them. You're not going to fill them if they're not advertising them. So we asked them to advertise these and still weren't filled, so we've taken the vacancies because we're paying for 43 posts and we never had more than 21 over the last 5 years. I think that's fiscal responsibility. Really, to talk about, again, fiscal responsibility, when this administration took over in May, we were facing a £10 million structural deficit, which was handed to us. Maybe the reserves and the COVID reserves weren't taken at that time, but they have been used by officers if we approve the paper coming up. I'd just like to say also that I'm sure that across the UK, local authorities, not under the auspices of funding from the Scottish Government, are facing exactly the same problems. It seems to be even worse in England and Wales. But take no comfort from that, because that's our colleagues down there are suffering at least as worse position we are. I'd like to thank everybody that came forward to speak to us. The Liberal Democrat Party came last week and with some very good proposals, which went away and thought about, and we've accepted some of them in. I think they're going to help our residents. The same with the independent, I was almost going to say independent Labour group as a matter of habit, but better define that. To the independent group came and spoke to us as well, and we worked through things together. I think it's slightly disingenuous for the Labour Party to accuse us of not taking part in the debate at all on their to go into the proposals they came forward when they came on Monday morning to speak about the budget was on Wednesday. But hopefully moving forward we can work closer together ahead of things. And I extend that to the Conservative group. The door will always be open for any committee or anything. Happy to share stuff with you to get the best result. Today I went to the Conservative group. They didn't come to me. And hopefully we can learn by the outcome of this that we can all feed in something to create a better budget. So on the top of that, I wholly commend this amended motion by the SNP administration. Thank you. Don't worry, I'm not coming back again for another go.
Thank you, Mr. Leader. Thank you, members, for your contributions today. This is possibly one of the most important items of the year, if not the most important item of the year. A considerable amount of work does go into it by both members and, as we've heard today, from officers. And I would like to thank, on my behalf, officers for their support and indeed your support today in helping us get through this at a reasonable pace. We are ahead of my anticipated timings, so you are doing well. I'm now going to hand over to Mr. Hendry to take a roll call vote of the first vote, and if there are going to be 3 votes. So, Mr. Hendry, I'll leave you with the proceedings.
Thank you, Provost. Members, we're dealing with item 3 on the agenda, the Strategic Planning Update and 2023 to 26 General Fund Revenue Budget, a joint report by the Chief Executive and Head of Finance. We have a motion by Councillors Lang and Drysdale, headed up Scottish National Party, that has been circulated to you, that now includes the revisions that were also circulated to you following the recess, and the one further verbal update from Councillor Lang to the revised motion. We've got the first amendment from Councillor Duff, seconded by Councillor Smith, that was headed up Scottish Conservative and Unionist Group. We have a second amendment from Councillor Colin Stewart, seconded by Councillor Cuthbert, headed up Independent. We had a third amendment from Councillor Peter Barrett, seconded by Bailey McLaren, that was headed up Scottish Liberal Democrat Group. However, that amendment was subsequently withdrawn. So now we have what was a fourth amendment, but is now a third amendment from Bailey and Councillor Leishman, who headed up Scottish Labour Group. So each amendment will be voted against each other until we're left with one amendment that will then be put against the motion. So first of all, can I ask you to indicate whether you're voting for the second amendment from Councillor Colin Stewart or the third amendment from Bailey Ahern?
Abstain.
Councillor Allen?
Abstain.
Councillor Anderson? Bailey?
Third amendment.
Councillor Liz Barrett?
Abstain.
Councillor Peter Barrett?
Abstain.
Councillor Braun?
Abstain.
Bailey Brock?
Second amendment.
Councillor Carr?
Abstain.
Councillor Chan?
Abstain.
Councillor Cuthbert?
Second amendment.
Councillor Donaldson?
Abstain.
Councillor Drysdale?
Abstain.
Councillor Duff?
Abstain.
Councillor Forbes?
Abstain.
Councillor Frampton?
Abstain.
Councillor Freshwater?
Abstain.
Councillor Harvey?
Abstain.
Councillor Illingworth?
Abstain.
Councillor James?
Abstain.
Councillor Kogali?
Abstain.
Councillor Lang?
Abstain.
Councillor Leishman?
Third amendment.
Councillor McPherson?
Abstain.
Councillor Massey?
Abstain.
Councillor McCall?
Abstain.
Provis?
Second amendment.
Councillor McEwen? Bailey McLaren?
Abstain.
Deputy Provost? Councillor Rebeck? Councillor Reid?
Abstain.
Councillor Robertson? Councillor Shires?
Abstain.
Councillor Smith?
Abstain.
Councillor Collins?
Second amendment.
Councillor Grant Stewart?
Abstain.
Councillor Water?
Abstain.
Councillor Welsh? And Bailey Williams?
Abstain.
Obviously, we have 4 votes for the second amendment. We have 2 votes for the third amendment and 34 abstentions. So therefore, the second amendment is carried. We will now move to put the Second Amendment against the First Amendment. So now if councillors can confirm whether they're voting for the First Amendment by Councillor Duff or the Second Amendment by Councillor Colin Stewart. Bailey Ahern.
First Amendment.
Councillor Allen.
First Amendment.
Councillor Anderson.
First Amendment.
Bailey.
Second Amendment.
Councillor Liz Barrett.
Abstain.
Councillor Peter Barrett.
Abstain.
Councillor Braun.
First Amendment.
Bailey Brock.
Second Amendment.
Councillor Carr.
Abstain.
Councillor Chan.
First Amendment.
Councillor Cuthbert.
Second Amendment.
Councillor Donaldson.
Abstain.
Councillor Dries.
Abstain.
Councillor Duff.
First Amendment.
Councillor Forbes.
First Amendment.
Councillor Frampton. Councillor Freshwater.
First Amendment.
Councillor Harvey.
Abstain.
Councillor Illingworth.
Abstain.
Councillor James.
First Amendment.
Councillor Cogal.
First Amendment.
Councillor Lang.
Abstain.
Councillor Leishman.
Second Amendment.
Councillor McPherson.
Abstain.
Councillor Massey. Councillor McCall.
Abstain.
Provost.
Second Amendment.
Councillor McEwen.
Abstain.
Bailey McLaren.
Abstain.
Deputy Provost.
Abstain.
Councillor Rebeck. Councillor Reid.
First Amendment.
Councillor Rob.
Abstain.
Councillor Shires.
First Amendment.
Councillor Smith.
First Amendment.
Councillor Colin Stewart.
Second Amendment.
Councillor Grant Stewart.
Abstain.
Councillor Waters.
Abstain.
Councillor Welsh.
Abstain.
And Bailey Williamson.
Abstain.
Provost, we have 13 votes for the First Amendment, 6 votes for the Second Amendment and 21 abstentions. So the First Amendment is carried and now becomes the substantive amendment. So finally, can I now ask members whether they're voting for the motion by Councillor Lang or the amendment by Councillor Duff? Bailey Ahern. Councillor Allen.
Amendment.
Councillor Anderson.
Amendment.
Bailey.
Abstention.
Councillor Liz Barrett.
Motion.
Councillor Peter Barrett.
Motion.
Councillor Braun.
Amendment.
Bailey Brock.
Motion.
Councillor Carr.
Motion.
Councillor Chan.
Amendment.
Councillor Cuthbert.
Motion.
Councillor Donaldson.
Motion.
Councillor Drysdale.
Motion.
Councillor Duff.
Amendment.
Councillor Forbes.
Amendment.
Councillor Frampton.
Motion.
Councillor Freshwater. Amendment. Councillor Harvey.
Motion.
Councillor Illingworth.
Amendment.
Councillor James.
Amendment.
Councillor Kogali.
Amendment.
Councillor Lang.
Motion.
Councillor Leishman.
Abstain.
Councillor McPherson.
Motion.
Councillor Massey.
Motion.
Councillor McCall.
Motion.
Provost.
Motion.
Councillor McEwen.
Motion.
Bailey McLaren.
Motion.
Deputy Provost. Councillor Rebeck.
Motion.
Councillor Reid.
Amendment.
Councillor Robertson.
Motion.
Councillor Shires.
Amendment.
Councillor Smith.
Amendment.
Councillor Colin Stewart.
Motion.
Councillor Grant Stewart.
Motion.
Councillor Waters.
Motion.
Councillor Welsh.
Motion.
And Bailey Williamson.
Motion.
Provost, we have 24 votes for the motion, 14 votes for the amendment with 2 abstentions, so the motion is therefore carried.
Thank you, Mr. Hendry. We now, members, move on to item 4, which is the Strategic Investment and Capital Budget Update. Would members like a short comfort break at this point? 10 minutes? 10 minutes. We'll resume at just the back of 15:15. Working now, but and then it was coming straight. Good afternoon, members. Welcome to item 4 of today's business, which is the Strategic Investment and Capital Budget Update 2023-24 to 27-28. And the Chief Executive is going to introduce the report along with the Head of Finance.
Thank you, Provost. Given the time, I will keep my comments extremely limited and will leave the main remarks to Mr. Mackenzie. We have trailed the particular challenges that we face in relation to our funding of our capital programmes and key projects throughout this year through Finance and Resources Committee. The one additional comment I would make is just to focus not only again on the budget element in terms of the finances for the coming year, but the commitment that officers have set out within this report to look at a longer term approach to the use of our assets through asset planning across a range of different asset portfolios. As officers, we see that as a key element of work that we'll be undertaking in your behalf over the next 6 months, and with that report being brought back to Council at a future date, when we understand that that will give you a much more informed position to look at your longer term asset planning. So that's the one other item I would highlight, but I will then pass over to Mr. Mackenzie.
Thank you, Provost, and thank you, Chief Executive. Section 5 of the report, if I may start there, shows commitments against the £190 million of investment capacity approved by Council last February, with only £25.6 million of this capacity remaining uncommitted. And paragraph 5.5 refers. As members have previously been advised, forecast construction inflation capital projects and programmes exceeds this capacity, meaning that the capital plan, as currently specified, is no longer affordable in its entirety. The capital funding position is also impacted by increases in borrowing costs since the budget was approved last February, and by the need to review ongoing levels of capital investment beyond 2027-28. Based on the proposed work on asset planning, which the Chief Executive has alluded to, approval is sought to develop a long-term investment plan and revised capital funding strategy for consideration by Council in setting a budget in 2024. In the interim, Council is asked to approve Appendix 1 to the report as the basis for updating the General Fund Capital Delivery Plan for the 5-year period from 2023-24 to 2027-28. Excuse me. Let's catch up on my apologies. Finger trouble here. The final business case. The final business case for the proposed new Blairgowrie Recreation Centre is attached at Appendix 2 to the report and summarised in Section 7. The cost of delivering the project has increased by £9.3 million to £36 million. On the grounds of affordability of the overall capital programme, it is recommended that the project be paused pending a further review of the investment needs of the Blairgowrie community. Section 8 recommends pausing the delivery of the previously approved PH2O project on the grounds of overall affordability. The revised cost estimate for the project now being £110 million, an increase of £20 million over the approved budget of £90 million. The report makes further funding recommendations totalling approximately £15.5 million in respect of the following projects. The outline business case for the Perth Eco Innovation Park is attached to Appendix 3 and summarised in Section 9 of the report. Given the strategic importance of a long-term project to the local economy, it is recommended that the Council approve funding of £10 million towards the estimated £32.8 million cost for Phase 1, for the remaining cost of enabling works included as part of the updated capital funding strategy. Section 10 sets out further funding recommendations of approximately £5.5 million, of which £4.4 million is in relation to repair works to the Gary Viaduct. The balance of project implementation and licensing costs in respect of key council systems. Members are therefore asked to consider the recommendations within the report in the context of significant financial and delivery pressures on the capital budget, and the need to review both the council's long-term capital investment requirements and its capacity to support this investment. Before concluding, members were advised earlier in the week of 2 corrections to the published report. The references in section 2 do not align with the body of the text, as recommendation C has incorrectly been split into 2 parts, and also with reference to paragraph 6.6. The figure quoted should correctly be stated as £12.575 million to include the provision for the Gowrie Recreation Centre in the current year of £9.668 million in Appendix 1. Happy to take questions, Provost, but given the first report went so well, I remain hopeful.
Thank you, Mr. Mackenzie. Are there any questions from members on the report? Looks like you might be getting off lightly again, Mr. Mackenzie. There being no questions on the report, I'm going to invite the Leader of the Council to move a motion.
Thanks, Provost, and I expect to be far more dapper the next time I come here, because Bailey Ahern has offered to buy me a new suit, jacket and shirt, I think was the arrangement in the interval there. So I look forward to that for the next time. Thank you. Oh, it's Keith, Councillor Allen, yes, thanks. Thanks, Provost. Provost, as we've just outlined in the revenue budget debate, challenging times require extremely difficult decisions. This is particularly true of the Council's capital budget. The Head of Finance has consistently made it clear that the current capital programme in its entirety is not affordable. So, as I said in my revenue budget motion, this SNP administration will not shy away from taking those hard decisions, even if they do not prove to be popular in the short to medium term. Unprecedented inflationary increases have been particularly significant in the construction industry, as we have seen over the last 10 months. The cost of approved projects has risen by millions of pounds. Added to this, borrowing costs have increased substantially. And so, while the Council, in its last term, prudently set aside additional monies in last year's capital budget, this is still not enough to deliver what has already been agreed in relation to new investment. Just as importantly, there is also insufficient funding to look after and protect the assets that we already have and need to preserve. I am therefore happy to endorse the recommendation within the paper in terms of the review of the capital funding strategy to support our identified investment needs. This is in line with my previously stated views that decisions should be based on need and not demand. The investment plan, driven by the principles within the investment blueprint and underpinned by robust asset management plans, will ensure that we have an approach which is affordable, deliverable and focused. This will support a revised capital funding strategy beyond 2027-2028, driven by evidence and fact. We have committed additional revenue money to speed up the process of decarbonising our public buildings, providing £2 million to support this. However, we are already aware that underinvestment in the key asset workstream of structures, such as bridges, already has the potential to cause problems across the council area. As a result, I am committed to funding the Gowrie Viaduct as recommended within the report. This will safeguard an important lifeline on the road network. However, this does not go far enough, and so I am investing a further £2 million towards bridges and structures to add to the investment that was put in by the last administration. Our Our whole council investment will also help to address a significant climate change issue, which is contributing to bridge scouring problems. These proposals, combined with what has just been accepted within the revenue budget, means that this administration is putting almost £20 million towards our roads and structures network. This is a clear commitment to our approach of protecting essential assets. However, we remain prudent in our spending approach, and these commitments will be funded by removing the proposed collection store from the current capital programme. In addition, we will use the remainder of that funding to support the development of a transient site for gypsy travellers within the Food and Drink Park in North Newton, Perth. This will provide a site which meets current requirements, fosters better relations across our communities, and ensures a more managed approach to the current demands placed on councils, services and budgets. Officers will continue to discuss opportunities with the Scottish Government and other partners to fund this and the access road. This still provides sufficient funding for the current minor improvements which are being undertaken at Perth Art Gallery to enhance the experience of those who visit it. Our administration is also supporting the recommendations in the report in relation to CMIS and Mosaic, as they are important to ensure that both school and adult care management information systems remain functional. The administration is determined to provide the people of East Perthshire what has long been promised. We are therefore rejecting the proposal to pause Blairgowrie Recreation Centre, committing to both funding the project and seeing it built as soon as possible. However, we reluctantly accept the proposal to defer PH2O, given that this is a project very much in the planning stages. To mitigate this, as outlined within my revenue budget motion, we are funding a feasibility study to assess what capital monies are required across our leisure facilities. This is to ensure we can meet need across the council area rather than simply in Perth. Despite all the financial challenges we face, we are an administration full of ambition for the area. This includes looking forward and focusing on our local economy. Our future must see move away from lower paid jobs to higher value ones, while improving our competitiveness in an increasingly tough market nationally and supporting our transition to net zero. I'm delighted to support the £10 million funding towards the cost for phase 1 of the Perth Eco Innovation Park, and I look forward to this being taken forward through capital funding strategy for consideration in 2024. As leader, I remain personally committed to securing interest and investment nationally and internationally in the development and completion of this site. Our SNP administration's capital budget reflects the priorities within the corporate plan. It also demonstrates fiscal responsibility while still seeking to support our ambitions for the area as a whole. Provost, I am happy to move the capital budget report.
Thank you, Mr. Leader. Mr. Deputy Leader, would you like to second the report?
Thank you, Provost. I've been called a few nicknames in my time, many of them less than complimentary, so I would just like to personally thank Councillor Forbes for giving me a new nickname of Attack Dog earlier this afternoon. Whatever.
It's not just a dog. You're the lapdog.
Anyway, it's been a long day, so you'll be glad to know I won't be speaking for long. But I am happy to endorse the proposals within this paper in relation to, firstly, a capital strategy going forward to ensure that we make the wisest decisions in the future. The pausing of PH2O in light of the current financial situation. The £10 million funding for the Perth Eco Innovation Park. The funding for the Garry Viaduct.
and the monies for the 2 management information systems. I'm delighted that we are able to proceed without delay on Blairgowrie Recreation Centre, and as a result of the funding being made available from the removal of the collections store from our capital projects, I am delighted that we can fund a further £2 million for the bridges and structures, and also provide monies for the Gypsy Traveller Transient site at the Food and Drink Park in North Muirton, Perth. In addition, we will also provide £2 million to make our properties more energy efficient through the judicious use of our revenue funding. Provost, I am happy to second the motion.
Thank you very much, Councillor Drysdale. Councillor John Duff, as the second largest party, do you have a... No, you do not. Thank you. Okay. Councillor Colin Stewart, you have an amendment to move.
Thanks, Provost. That came round quicker than I was expecting. Our members will be circulated. We're not bringing it up on screen, so I'll just talk briefly through it. Our first proposal is to approve the report with the exception of the Perth Kinross Lighting Action Plan. That releases £1.677 million of capacity, which we would apply to the following projects. £1 million additional to the, in addition, added to the core paths budget. Across Perth and Kinross, we see large numbers of house building, Stanley, Kinross, Ochterarder, Scone in my own ward being just some examples. And this would add budget to allow more core paths to be upgraded and new ones to be added in areas where this new development is happening. Additional cemetery funding to provide much needed space of £100,000, and the additional A977 mitigation measures that are required, something that was committed originally, I think, 6 years ago, but the project still hasn't been completed. So this would be funding of £350,000 to complete those measures. In addition, we would put forward 2 proposals with to go through the investment blueprint process. They are the acquisition of land for affordable housing in rural areas. I'm sure all rural councillors know the pressures that there are on affordable housing. This would provide the land which we could then commission the building of affordable housing on, and it would apply across the whole of Perth and Kinross. An indicative amount only would be £2 million. And we would also propose an indicative amount of £165,000, but the proposal that would go through the investment blueprint would be for an e-bike initiative in Kinrossshire. The e-bike initiative exists in neighbouring local authorities around that part of the world. And so if the pilot was approved, then it would link up with those other areas, and if it was successful, it could go further throughout Perth and Kinross. Finally, we agree with the recommendation to proceed with the delivery of the Blairgowrie Recreation Centre to fulfil our long-standing commitment to the Blairgowrie and the Glens, Strathmore and Strathtay communities in particular. But we would ask that a condition is applied which instructs officers to apply for funding from charitable and government bodies that support the funding of sporting facilities in order to help reduce that capital cost. There are plenty of examples across Perth and Kinross, and indeed I guess across the country, where community groups have got together and accessed such funding, and we hope that that would be available and achievable. I'll conclude my remarks there and commend these suggestions to the Chamber.
Thank you, Councillor Stewart. Councillor Cuthbert, second.
Thank you, Provost. Yes, I'm happy to second this motion. I think all these items we put forward are things that will benefit virtually all councillors in the rural area in particular. There are pressures on the core paths. When you get a new estate built and there's another new estate built, you sometimes want paths that link. You can't necessarily get that from a developer contribution, so it means that you can add new core paths in the area. In terms of cemetery funding, this is self-financing, if you like, because what happens when you add a cemetery is you sell the plots and you actually get the money back with potentially quite a lot of extra money. The A977 mitigation measures, in essence, what's happened is that the work started and there are 2 projects left, but there's a shortfall in delivering that, and this would just fill the gap in terms of completing the projects and having the funding to do so. The affordable housing idea, I mean, this has come up all over the place. I constantly hear about problems with affordable housing in communities like Pitlochry, in Crooked Devon, in other communities all over Perth and Kinross. And the problem is we can't get the monies that are available for investing in affordable houses unless there's actually ground to build them on. So this proposal is basically about buying the land so we can actually deliver affordable housing in the countryside where it's needed. The e-bike initiative, this is coming actually from a group there's a group called Move Greener in Kinross. They've been looking to bring in an e-bike type hire service, and in essence, the Clackmannanshire, Falkirk, Stirlingshire, all these areas actually are running the same system. It's a group called Forth Bikes, and all we're looking to do is to trial it in Kinrossshire, and should it be successful, then look to put it across the whole of Perth Kinross. The service is fantastic. I've used the e-bikes, and it's something that we lack and we should be looking to do at some point just for our climate change agenda. Anyway, I'd like to second the motion put forward by Councillor Stewart. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Cuthbert. Councillor Liz Barrett, you have a point of clarification.
Yes, please, could you clarify what's involved in the Perth Kinross Lighting Action Plan that we're being asked to remove, because it's just a single line in Appendix 1D. Thank you.
So we are into motions and amendments. So, I mean, I'm going to go to the mover of the amendment to see if they wish to provide further clarification and can provide further clarification. I wouldn't normally throw it to officers, but I will in this occasion if they're unable to provide the clarification you require.
There was a glossy brochure at the start of the last council term which laid out what was in the Perth Lighting Action Plan, as it was named at that time. I don't know what's left in the programme for the Perth and Kinross Lighting Action Plan. I know it's not, a lot of these items are not very popular with the public, but one of the reasons that I'm concerned about this spend is because there is no updating on it to council members, and I can't say what's left in it, and one of the officers might want to come in at this point.
Barbara Renton.
Thank you, Provost. The lighting strategy was approved a number of years ago for Perth, and it was very much intended to be linked to as an economic driver. So a lot of the work that you have seen, the bridges across the river at Riverside Park, the lighting of St Paul's, the lighting of St Matthew's Church, etc., has been as a result of that. It also has included, for example, the animals that were used over the Christmas festive period, which we are obviously keeping in store and will use for a number of purposes, and also be able to hire those out to other local authorities and other organisations over the course of the period of time. As I acknowledged at the last the last Finance and Resources Committee, then yes, we were acknowledging that we had not brought a lighting strategy update, and I apologise for that. The intention is to bring that to an EI and ED committee probably for June, because we will not get that done for March. It continues, you know, sort of we have a number of commitments, I think, already within the proposals for this year. Part of that is to for the golden route from Dunkeld Road to the station, and we just need to be mindful that that and look at the commitments for that. I am certain, and I'm looking at Caroline, that after FNR chose and agreed not to make any further commitments, that there has been no further commitments to since that decision was agreed by the Chief Executive, but I cannot at the moment tell you what has properly and fully been committed from the lighting strategy, and whether all of the 1.67 million that Councillor Stewart has referred to is currently available.
Thank you.
I'm really not looking to get into debate here. Okay, you can provide further clarification on the point of clarification then.
Just to say that this idea came from the raw data that's held behind the questionnaires that were sent out to constituents of Perth and Kinross, and they completed the survey. There's a whole lot of raw data behind it. There are numerous comments in there about how upset they are by seeing lights and bridges being lit up and all these things when they can't actually afford to light their own homes. So that's where the idea came from.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm now going to invite Bailey to move his amendment.
Thank you, Provost. PH2O and the vision for a fit-for-purpose pool for Perth is something that we won't stop talking about. It was a manifesto pledge. That's something that once you're elected, you're meant to deliver on or die in a ditch trying. I think I'm probably dying here. I respect that Council has just decided not to bridge the PH2O funding gap. However, there is another way. Yes, PH2O is over budget, but in hard times we have to make hard choices. This amendment proposes that we continue with the part that will have the biggest impact on local families. The pools at Perth see far more footfall than bowling and curling combined. Therefore, we propose going ahead with the pool and leaving £20 million on the table for curling and bowling towards improving their facilities or towards their future new build if they so wish. For similar reasons, we fully support proceeding with Blairgowrie Rec. Others have spoken amply to that, so I'll move on. The budget also includes an extra £4 million for flooding. We have to do more than write reports about the flooding of the Craigie Burn. This is money that can start to address it. Sadly, the Council just decided to cut an officer from the flooding team, but nonetheless, we're showing how there is money for actual flooding mitigations if we want it as a Council. Finally, this capital amendment keeps the West Kinfauns Park and Ride on the agenda for future development and for blueprinting. We have to invest in public transport infrastructure if we're to both tackle climate change and the cost of living crisis. This is another amendment from Labour that sees us living well within our means. Thank you, Provost. I commit this amendment to the Chamber.
Thank you, Bailey. Councillor Leishman to second.
Thanks very much, Provost. Before I was a councillor, even before I was a golf professional, I studied history and politics at university. And I'm going to try and combine history, politics and sport here in this comment. The Second World War was a global cataclysm that killed approximately 60 million people. It left millions more displaced and traumatised. To narrow the scope of that down to Britain, approximately 880,000 British soldiers died. That was 6% of the adult male population and 12.5% of those it served. Although victorious, Britain in 1945 was on its knees. And as well as a horrific loss of life, large areas of our major cities were also in ruins. 475,000 houses had been destroyed by enemy bombs. Yet, despite the devastation, the Labour Party laid out a bold vision pledging to destroy the 5 evil giants of the time, which were want, squalor, disease, ignorance and unemployment. Once in power, the newly elected government didn't waste any time. There was no aiming for mid-table mediocrity like rejoicing in being 14th best out of 32 for anything. So that Labour government enacted visionary, transformative and radical change by introducing social security, bringing key industries back into public ownership, embarking on a major programme of house building and creating our greatest national achievement, our National Health Service. This was all done because people desperately needed it. And all of these achievements came at the time when Britain had built up sterling credits, those debts to countries that would have to be paid in foreign currencies. We had nothing to export, the economy was in disarray, we didn't have any way to pay for imports, and in international terms, Britain was bankrupt. Now, in 2023, we have lost over 200,000 people to COVID-19. If you give me another 10 seconds, you won't be disappointed. Now in 2023, we have lost over 200,000 people to COVID-19. We have workers from many industries on strike because they are seeing an assault on their pay and their terms and conditions. We have another housing shortage. We see inequalities growing with life expectancy between the richest and the poorest in our communities getting wider. Once again, like in 1945, our economy is in tatters. But this time, Britain's bankruptcy isn't just financial. With this government's actions, it's moral too. I know that local authorities' power has been marginalised. I spoke earlier today and said that complaining about having little power is just a lack of ambition and will. And this attitude will only lead to people in our communities suffering. The lazy idea that this council can't effectively change things for the better, that it can't harness wealth and finances and improve a resident's lot in life is an absurd piece of nonsense. Our people don't need letters written to ministers. Our people need to know that this is not as good as it gets. The last few years has been some sort of hell on earth, but unlike those that find themselves in purgatory, this council can go one of two ways. We really do have a choice. And the choice we should take as a council should be a bold and truly transformative one. We support the delivery of Blairgowrie Recreation Centre because sport can be a great equaliser in society. It can bring people together in a shared purpose and goal. Friends and families participate together, we meet new people, it creates skills, it builds and reveals character and instills pride and a sense of achievement. Sport truly enriches and empowers people of all ages. The physical and mental health benefits of exercise and fitness are manifest. And with Blairgowrie Rec being 40 years old and not having had any major upgrades, people from Eastern Perth are in real need of a new facility. The Perth Kinross Labour Group are committed to providing the very best sport, exercise and fitness offering possible to people all over our region. Our commitment to that doesn't stop at Blairgowrie Recreation Centre. As we outlined in our revenue budget amendment, it's our vision to provide a new modern sports and leisure facility for people from all across our communities to enjoy. We remain committed to delivering the PH2O swimming pool leisure development to fit in with our capital programme. Live Active Leisure have reported that our leisure pool has reaped the benefits of the pool at Olympia and Dundee being closed. And by building PH2O, we build change in Perth, brick by brick, as PH2O is essential in making Perth a family-friendly visitor destination we all want our place to be. We believe that when people's need is at its greatest, then that is when we must act boldly and with determination. We should look to the will and vision shown in 1945, because time is of the essence, and we must choose to act in a way that really does provide for our people and transforms our communities for the better. I am happy to commend the Perth Kinross Labour Group's amendment for the capital budget programme. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Leishman. Members, we're going to take a recess at this point. Is 10 minutes enough, or do members wish longer? 10? 10 is acceptable. Okay, we will resume at 5 past. 5 past 5, members. Good afternoon again, members. Welcome back to this afternoon's council meeting, and we are currently discussing the council's capital budget. I have a point of clarification from Councillor Dave Cuthbert.
Thank you. I was just wondering if the Leader of the Administration would be minded to incorporate some of the items on the various amendments.
Thank you. Mr. Leader, do you have anything to provide clarification-wise?
Thanks. I'll be brief for both sanity and time. After conferring with all the groups there again, I'm happy to ask for a pause in the lighting strategy plan until we elected members can further examine the proposals within. I am happy to adopt into my motion the £350,000 to finish the A977, which had funding, but because of the cost of living and inflation crisis, that road has run short of money and is not yet complete. So I think we should go ahead and complete it, because there must be a business case already there for that to be built so far. I would also like to get an officer, mandate officers to develop a strategic business case for the line from the Independence to acquire land for affordable housing in rural areas. And finally, there may have been some confusion over the naming last year between Willowgate, that was in the Conservative motion, and is coming back as West Kinross. So we'll just reiterate that we would also include in it, the officers bring forward develop a strategic business case for the West Kinross Park and Choose. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Leader. Councillor Colin Stewart, you have a point of order.
Thank you very much, Provost. On the basis of the undertaking, sorry, actually my point of order is, would you like to invite the Deputy Leader, whether he's minded to incorporate those into the motion?
Well, as you know, per standing orders, when a point of order is put in, it has to be taken straight away. So I was just taking that before I went to the Deputy Leader. If that was your point of order, then I'm happy to go to the Deputy Leader now, but I suspect that you did have a further point of order.
Should the Deputy Leader be minded to accept those recommendations into the motion, I'm very content that satisfies most of the objectives of the independent group amendment, and would like to withdraw it.
Thank you. Mr. Deputy Leader, are you content with what the Leader of the Council agreed to?
Thinking about it. Yeah, okay then, okay. Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Cuthbert, are you content to withdraw?
I am, Provost, thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, that amendment is therefore withdrawn. Therefore, members, we now move on to comments in respect of this item. We now have a motion and an amendment, and I'm just going to remind all members that comments should be relevant to the paper that we are discussing and the proposals in front of us. And I will particularly adhere that to those members who raised the matter with me during the recess. So we will now go to Councillor Peter Barrett, who has a comment.
Thanks, Provost, and I'm not sure it's relevant, but all this talk about canine aggressors suddenly made me think of the comment that Dennis Healy made regarding being savaged by a dead sheep after Geoffrey Howe had a go at him. However, I want to offer my support for the motion put forward by the Leader of the Council for the capital budget, and specifically for the inclusion of the amendment to fund the Gypsy Traveller Transit site. That decision and proposal brings to a conclusion a sorry saga of failure to deliver a transit site, which I first attempted to do some 16 years ago. On the bright side, as I mentioned previously, making this move today on top of bringing the management of Gypsy Traveller sites at Bobbin Mill and Double Dykes into the HRA, securing the investment to replace all the chalets at Double Dykes. These mark the greatest steps forwards we have made in terms of transforming the lives of Gypsy travellers for 16 years, and I'm really grateful to members of all party who have helped contribute towards that, and particularly my successors as convener of housing, councillors Bob Braun and Tom McEwen, and I'm also very grateful to Councillor Ahern for his backing for the motion for the preferred option very recently. So it's really good news, and I think tangible progress in terms of taking the Gypsy Traveller and equality agendas forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Barrett. Councillor Tom McEwen.
And here was me going to give you a big chat about the pharmaceutical industry and how it has strengths and weaknesses, but I'll stick to your budget instead then. Thank you, Councillor Barrett. I completely agree with what you said. I suppose that timing has been right for this Gypsy Traveller site, and that we were able to pass the paper at the last Housing Committee at the end of January, and that the budget has come along so closely behind it for us to move this forward. And I agree with what he said on that item. I'm also glad that Blairgowrie Recreation Centre is going to go over another hurdle. You know, you get the 110 metre hurdles at the Olympics. I don't know what distance of hurdles that the Blairgowrie Rec Centres had to now jump over to get to a finish line, but let's hope this is the last time I ever talk about it at this committee, which is what I said the last time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor McEwen. Bailey McLaren.
Thank you. Extremely briefly, I welcome hearing from our leader of his additional 2 million towards roads, and I'm extremely hopeful that that maybe include the Stuart Tower Road, and therefore I am supportive of his motion.
Okay, thank you, Bailey McLaren. Councillor Braun.
Thank you, Provost. We know from the paper that the capital budget is in a difficult situation. Difficult circumstances require difficult decisions. I'm aware of the leader's support for LAL and PH2O, dare I say passionate support. He was on the board when I joined it, and I know he's been a great supporter of both, and therefore appreciate how difficult this decision is. But as delaying PH2O is agreed, it opens the door for other projects to proceed, including that of the Blairgowrie Recreation Centre. This is a new build project, much promised, much needed, much supported by all the local ward councillors, Councillor Shars, Councillor McEwen, and myself. If I can just add to that, I know that this is not what the LAL board, of which I'm a member, want to hear, but at the current estimate of 110 million, and with construction inflationary pressure still with us, it represents a massive project for PKC, second only, I believe, to the Cross Tay Link Road. And considering the current economic climate, the recommendations of officers, and the need to avoid further pressure on the revenue budget, sadly, this seems to be the optimum way forward. My hope is that this pause will allow a constructive review of the project, which in turn will put it back on track in due course. Thank you, Provost.
Thank you, Councillor Braun. We have a point of clarification from Bailey Ahern.
Yes, probably just when it's appropriate to identify exactly what we've has been incorporated into the motion from the independent amendment. I know there's some of the items that were put in there, but I'm not want clarity about whether what's in it and what's not in it, and where it's coming, the funding's coming from.
So Mr. Henry is going to just outline what has been agreed as the final motion.
Yeah, Provost, just to clarify, so the elements from the independent amendment are to do with the pausing of the lighting plan, the £350,000 for the A977, the business case for the acquisition of land for affordable housing in rural areas, and let me just confirm with the leader, he made reference to the proposal to do with Westcon Fawns, if you can just clarify.
That is, as I said, it may have been in the budget last year to run for officers to develop a strategic business case, but labelled under Willowgate. It may be the same. area, but we wish the officers to develop a strategic business case for the West Kinross Park and Choose. Right, there's no cost to 3 of the items. The only cost is from the Kinross upgrade to finish. Was started under the last administration, but the funding has turned out to be inadequate because of the rise in inflation and costs. So that £350,000 will come from the capital budget. I hope that clears things up, Chris.
It does. I'm just a bit concerned about pausing the lighting strategy when we've already been told by Barbara Renton that we'll get a paper back to EIED to let us know where we're going in that. Sorry, it's part of my clarification. How can we pause something we don't know what we're pausing?
We're pausing it, Chris, to find out what we're pausing or to see what is involved in it. Any strategies or plans that have already been committed to out of the 1.6 million will go ahead because we've committed to them. But I think that would leave about £500,000 that is not yet committed. I want to pause it so as we as elected members can look at what has not been committed to before we spend it on something else.
Okay, thank you. We will now come to summing up. Bailey, do you wish to sum up your amendment?
Thank you, Provost, and you'll be thankful that I'll be brief. This amendment is the only one that gives the green light to a new swimming pool for Perth. If you still believe, as many of you stated you believed before, that Perth deserves a new fit-for-purpose pool, then this is the amendment to vote for. This is the one that gets it delivered now. Blair Gowrie Rec is still in there as well. A vote for this amendment is a vote for delivering on this council's promises on PH2O. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Leader, do you wish to sum up?
No, thanks. I'll decline that. I'll just move to the vote. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much. We now move to a vote between the motion as amended and the amendment, and Mr. Henry will take a roll call.
Thank you, Provost. We're dealing with item 4, the Strategic Investment and Capital Budget Update 2023-24 to 2027-28, joint report by the Chief Executive and Head of Finance, noting the minor adjustments to the report as indicated by the Head of Finance in his introduction. We have a motion from Councillors Lang and Councillor Drysdale that was headed up Scottish National Party that has been further revised to include the elements that we just clarified previously. We have a first amendment from Councillors Colin Stewart and Dave Cuthbert that was headed up Independent Group. However, that was subsequently withdrawn.
Councillor James, we have actually moved into the vote, but as we have not started to vote, I will come to you for a point of clarification. So we have actually moved to start a vote. However, because we have not started voting, I'm coming to you for a point of clarification.
Okay, thank you, Provost. It's further to Bailey Ahern's question. If we're unsure as to how much is in the lighting budget and we're going to commit to another 350k and that money's not in that budget, is this a competent thing to do? You know, do we have the 350k anywhere else if it's not in the lighting budget?
The Leader will provide clarity.
Councillor Ian, Councillor James, no, the 350,000 is not coming from the lighting strategy budget. It's paused. This is coming from the capital budget, and it's monies that we have available within it from our other decisions and within the capacity within the general capital budget. It's unrelated to what we're doing with the lighting strategy.
Okay, we will. I'm just going to, is everyone absolutely clear? Yes. Okay, thank you. Right, we're going to return to the vote.
Thank you, Provost. Yes, so just to clarify, the first amendment from Councillors Stewart and Cuthbert was then withdrawn. So we're left with a single amendment from Bailey and Councillor Leishman that was circulated to you, headed up Scottish Labour Group. So if members can clarify whether they're voting for the motion by Councillor Lang or the amendment from Bailey. Bailey Ahern.
Motion.
Councillor Allen.
Motion.
Councillor Anderson.
Motion.
Bailey.
Amendment.
Councillor Liz Barrett.
Motion.
Councillor Peter Barrett.
Motion.
Councillor Braun.
Motion.
Bailey Brock.
Motion.
Councillor Carr.
Motion.
Councillor Chan.
Motion.
Councillor Cuthbert.
Motion.
Councillor Donaldson.
Motion.
Councillor Drysdale.
Motion.
Councillor Duff.
Motion.
Councillor Forbes.
Motion.
Councillor Frampton.
Motion.
Councillor Freshwater.
Motion.
Councillor Harvey.
Motion.
Councillor Illingworth.
Motion. Motion.
Thank you, Councillor James. Councillor Kigali.
Motion.
Councillor Lang.
Motion.
Councillor Leishman.
Amendment.
Councillor McPherson.
Motion.
Councillor Massey.
Motion.
Councillor McCall. Provost.
Motion.
Councillor McEwen.
Motion.
Bailey McLaren.
Motion.
Deputy Provost. Councillor Rebeck.
Motion.
Councillor Reid.
Motion.
Councillor Robertson.
Motion.
Councillor Shires.
Motion.
Councillor Smith.
Motion.
Councillor Colin Stewart.
Motion.
Councillor Grant Stewart.
Motion.
Councillor Waters.
Motion.
Councillor Welsh.
Motion.
And Bailey Williamson.
Motion.
Provost, we have 38 votes for the motion and 2 votes for the amendment, so the motion is carried.
Thank you, Mr. Hendry. Members, we move on to item 5, which is updates to the scheme of administration. Members, are you happy to agree the following changes to the scheme of administration to insert at section 31(3), whether to object to an application for consent under the Electricity Act 1989, section 36 or 37, and at section 23(11), the appeals subcommittee to comprise of 3 members of the council. Apart from appeals considering teaching staff, 3 members shall be drawn from the Learning and Families Committee. Are members happy to agree these changes? Thank you very much, members. That concludes today's business. Thank you for your work and patience, and thank you to officers as well. Have a good evening.